Warhammer 40,000 Space Marines 2 running on an RTX 5060 laptop against literally hundreds of Tyranids at once. And here's the verdict up front. This GPU handles it at every resolution. External monitor 1440p DLSS quality, all high settings is your sweet spot. Stuck on the laptop screen, 1080p max settings with DLSS quality. And if you just want a spectacle, yes, 4K is genuinely playable. I played almost an entire mission at 4K DLSS performance with 2 AI Marines at my side and it never stuttered once. Let's break down exactly why. If you're running an RTX 5060 laptop or a Rogue Ally Z1 Extreme and want honest numbers instead of marketing slides, this is the channel. Hit subscribe, it genuinely helps more than you'd think. Now before we get into the numbers, you need to understand why this game can throw so many enemies at you without your hardware catching fire. Space Marines 2 runs on Saber Interactive's proprietary Swarm engine. This isn't a reskin Unreal or a licensed tech stack. It's in-house and it was originally built for World War Z, where it could handle up to 500 zombies on screen at once. For Space Marines 2, Saber pushed that same tech even further. Bigger, denser Tyranid swarms layered with an AI director system that actually tracks you and your squad, singling you out instead of just throwing bodies at you randomly. That's the foundation. Now let's see what the RTX 5060 laptop actually does with it. So guys, starting at 1440p high settings, DLAA, no upscaling, pure native rendering. In calmer moments, we are sitting in the mid 50s, GPU pinned at 98%, temps in the low 80s. This is a GPU bound scenario, exactly what you'd expect. But throw a horde into the frame like this and it dips into the high 40s. Still playable, but you feel the dip if you're chasing buttery smoothness. What's actually impressive here is the frame time graph. Look how flat that stays. No spikes, no stutter events. Even when the FPS numbers drop, the pacing stays rock solid. That matters actually more than raw numbers. Now flip on DLSS quality, same 1440p, same high settings, nearly identical image clarity, but the frame rates jumps into the mid 80s. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Enable frame generation 2x on top of that. In these enormous horde fights, hundreds of Tyranids on screen, you're still looking at 90 to 120 FPS. That is genuinely impressive. One thing I verified before I went on record was with frame generation on, CPU usage actually eases off a bit, and so does the CPU temps. That's not the GPU waiting or anything, it's Nvidia's Reflex, which is mandatory under the hood for any kind of DLSS frame generation implementation, even though Space Marines 2 doesn't expose a toggle for it specifically. Reflex shrinks the render queue so the CPU isn't working as far ahead of the GPU as it normally would. Less speculative work, slightly lower usage, slightly lower temps. This is your best overall experience on an external monitor, 1440p DLSS quality, high settings, frame gen on if you want triple digits. Now if you're gaming on the laptop panel itself, not on an external display, the math changes a bit. Smaller screen means you can afford to push settings higher without the resolution costing you as much. You go 1200p or 1080p. Here I have benchmarked 1080p, so 1080p max settings DLSS quality. You're looking at around mid 70s to mid 80s FPS. Even in the most intense fight, it doesn't go below mid 70s. That headroom actually matters in this game. Space Marines 2 has fast, punishing melee combat with unparryable attack windows you need to react to. A stable mid-70s minimum means you're never fighting the frame rate and the Tyranids at the same time. So 1080p at max settings with DLSS quality, genuinely impressive. And now the one people always ask about, can this laptop even do 4K? Short answer, yes, with the right compromises. DLSS performance mode, a mix of high and medium settings, textures definitely on medium, texture filtering left to ultra since that setting is basically free. The image is still tack sharp. DLSS performance at 4K has enough native pixel information to reconstruct cleanly. But the medium and high mix does make it look a touch flatter than the 1440p experience or the 1080p experience. You notice it in lighting depth more than sharpness. Performance wise, mid 50s, and it holds mid 50s even in active combat. It's only the largest battles, and I mean genuinely massive Tyranid swarms, where it dips into the high 40s. So I want to be honest with you here. Instead of just quoting a number, after the prologue I almost played the entire first mission at 4K DLSS performance with the two AI Marines fighting alongside me. Frame pacing was superb, zero stutters, zero hiccups. If you bought this laptop, you've got a 4K display sitting around, don't just be afraid to try it. It's not just a checkbox feature for this particular game. It's a genuinely good experience, especially if you're using a controller. Quick technical note before we wrap up. You'll notice there's a ray traced ambient occlusion RTAO setting. That does not seem to work with 8GB GPUs and some of the Radeon GPUs completely. This is a guardrail put by the developers so that you do not exceed the 8GB VRAM. Space Marines 2 has a hard 12GB VRAM requirement baked into the RTAO settings itself. Our RTX 5060 laptop simply doesn't meet that criteria, and many of the desktop GPUs like the 3070, 3060 Ti, 5060 Ti 8GB, 5060 and so on, right? So for all of those cards, this settings is off. Worth knowing so that you don't go into digging into Nvidia control panel and all those settings and don't lose your mind over it. So to recap, the RTX 5060 laptop Space Marines 2 at every resolution, external monitor or a 1440p native panel, 1440p DLSS quality, high settings is the sweet spot, especially with frame gen, the triple digit smoothness. Laptop screens 1080p or 1200p max settings with DLSS quality gives you huge headroom, and it looks superb on laptop screens. It's so crisp. And if you want to go 4K display, if you have a TV or you just want to play around with the controller and have some patience with the settings, it's playable and honestly pretty spectacular. This is one of the better optimized big scale games I've tested on this hardware. If you found this useful, the subscribe button is right there, and let me know in the comments which resolution tier you are running.